Welcome to the Gen XZ Exchange. I'm Chris Perkins, Gen X parent, now 50-something empty nester with a fair few professional ups and downs under my belt.
And I'm Lily Perkins, Gen Z career explorer, here to learn some shortcuts from my dad while teaching him a few things. We swap insights on career choices, work and life in general.
So whether you're a Gen X parent trying to figure out midlife's challenges,
or a Gen Z young professional or student figuring out adulthood, you're in the right place.
welcome to our first episode. We should probably introduce ourselves to start with. I'm a 50-something married dad of two. We live in Scotland, just outside Stirling, right in the middle. I've had quite a varied corporate career covering retail, banking, training, HR, marketing agencies. Had my fair share of ups and downs. I've pivoted career a couple of times, survived 2 layoffs, done some property renovations with Linda, my wife, and now I'm training as an ICF certified coach.
I am a 22-year-old pharmacology dropout who is now studying English and social policy. I've been working in hospitality and retail since I was 16 and I'm now just thinking about my career after uni. And my interests are things like music, festivals, reading and fashion.
And you might be wondering, why are we doing this? Well, for me, I finally got the 2 kids out of the house and off to uni, so I've got some time on my hands. I was looking for a way to share some of my experiences with both generations and wanted to spend some time with you, Lily, and be able to share the odd bit of wisdom that might help you and Charlie, your younger brother, find your way in the world of work. And I thought it would be fun and it would push me creatively and I'd learn some new skills along the way.
Yeah, I'm also really excited to be able to just spend some time with my dad, catching up and gaining some insight into each other's lives and experiences. And as he will tell you, I'm always up for a chat or a vent. And I thought this would be a fun way for us to learn about each other, and especially for me getting some advice from my dad in preparation for graduating. Yeah, while teaching him some things about my generation and some of the challenges that we face in this day and age.
So how did we hit upon this topic for the first episode then, Lily?
I think just when we were chatting about some of the challenges we both face, like the midlife crisis is a pretty well-established concept that everyone is pretty familiar with, but there's now this discussion around the quarterlife crisis as well, which I've definitely already started to experience in some ways. I'm not quite there yet, but I think I'll feel the full force of it when I graduate. But when we were chatting about it, we just realised there was a lot that the 2 concepts have in common. So we thought it would make sense for us to exchange our thoughts on them to kick things off.
Oh, I see what you did there. Very clever.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, we're diving into something that hits people at different stages of life, the quarter-life crisis versus the midlife crisis. And we'll explore what these are, how they differ, and maybe even find some common ground. I think we'll definitely find some common ground, to be honest.
Yeah, so let's start with the quarter-life crisis then. For those who might not be familiar with that term, what does the research say this typically involves for young adults in their 20s?
Well, from what I've seen, the quarter-life crisis usually stems from feeling kind of lost and uncertain after all of the initial excitement of independence wears off. So this might be when people leave school or when people graduate uni. Just anxiety around things like career paths, relationships, friendships, just trying to figure out your place in the world and how to actually kind of be an adult.
Mm-hmm.
So one study from LinkedIn in 2021 found that 75% of 25 to 33-year-olds reported experiencing symptoms of a quarter-life crisis. So the top triggers are usually being overwhelmed by life choices and comparing yourselves to your peers on social media, those kind of things.
75%. I mean, that is the majority easily. Does that resonate with what you see among your friends?
I would say definitely, because I feel like if the study that I just mentioned actually extended to even younger 20-somethings, so the percentage could be even higher.
Mm-hmm.
Like speaking from experience, a lot of my friends are in different stages of their careers. Some already working or still studying or about to graduate. And from conversations I've had with all of them, I would definitely say there's this kind of underlying sense of anxiety, or for some I would go as far to even say like dread about what the future holds. And I think the way things are going with the current political and economic climate, these feelings are just becoming more and more common in my kind of age group.
Yeah.
I would say the fact that there's so much collective, like large scale uncertainty is probably leading people to internalize all these feelings, and we all end up kind of having crazy doubts about identity and our futures and stuff. So yeah, in the context of the midlife crisis, I haven't seen you rush out and buy any ridiculous sports cars or skinny jeans or other kind of questionable fashion choices yet. So do you feel like you've had one? Do you feel like you're heading towards one? I feel like if you have, you've kept it under wraps from me in the stereotypical way. So well done.
Thank you. Yeah, certainly don't feel like I've had or am heading towards the stereotypical midlife crisis.
Thank God.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced a significant slump in my 40s. If you remember when I was spending those years working away in London every week, but I wouldn't say that was a crisis, like in a clinical sense, but it was a real low point for me. And actually, I'm really curious as to what you remember of my mood then. So that would have been when you were between like 9 and 17 years old. You know, I was away sort of middle of the week, pretty much every week. Don't know if you have any recollections of that.
I think in my childhood, I remember you being away, but I think I was also quite young, and I think you and Mum did a really good job of kind of sheltering us from any external stresses in your own lives with the commuting or with Mum's work. So well done to you for that. Because I think at that age, you're only really aware of if your needs are being met or not. And mine were definitely being met, so I was pretty happy and content from what I remember. I think I will have definitely been missing you. I think I probably would have wanted like bedtime stories and stuff like that when you were away, but like overall from what I remember, I was pretty content. But I will say, I think when me and Charlie hit our teens, there was probably a bit of a shift, like nothing crazy, but just because we gained a little bit more like of an awareness of what was going on and the fact that you were having to go and work and all this stuff. So I would say if you're a parent who's probably worried about how your own stuff, like stuff that you had going on, Dad, like with the commute and stuff, if you're worried about how all that's affecting your kids, I can probably reassure you that you're probably doing a better job than you think, and your kids will probably just be grateful to have you in their lives, supporting them in whatever form that might take.
Oh, that is nice to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I'm interested to know if you feel like in that time, did you feel worried that your kind of slump that you were having was having a big impact on me and Charlie? Were you worried that you're doing like horrible damage to your kids, like not being there, like when you were working and stuff?
I was hoping it wasn't, because you're right. You know, we were under quite a bit of strain with me being away. I mean, I was absolutely exhausted. You know, I was up at 4:15 Tuesday morning for an early flight. I'd get back about 11 p.m. on a Thursday.
Yeah.
Mum was kind of having to deal with everything at home midweek.
Yeah, I remember her being really tired as well. I think it was just too much for both of you.
There were moments that really got me. I mean, I thought I needed to do that for the job that I was in, and it was paying a certain salary, which kind of provided the lifestyle that we had. I do remember, like on a Monday night sometimes, you know, when I would be home and able to read you stories. I remember Charlie a couple of times, because he was younger, him going to bed and saying, I hate it when you go away. Why do you have to go away?
Yeah.
And that really hit hard. And I think my response was, you know,
I've got to work.
I have to, you know, because of the job. Actually, looking back, I didn't have to.
Yeah.
I could have changed something at that point, but chose not to. But it didn't feel like I had a choice at the time. That's the way I look back on it now.
But that's probably, a bit of like a mini crisis in its own sense, because you were probably thinking, I am boxed into this. I'm like stuck in this job. I'm stuck in this predicament, even though, you know, my kids are expressing they want me home. That probably would have been a big stress for you. So it all worked out in the end, because you didn't have to commute anymore.
Yeah.
But let's maybe veer back a little bit, talk a bit more about how that relates to the actual concept of the midlife crisis. So have you got anything you'd like to tell?
The name midlife crisis comes from a paper that a psychoanalyst called Elliot Jacks published in 1965, and actually had a really mixed reaction from the scientific community, from researchers and clinicians. They really didn't think there was strong evidence that it was a thing. But the media at the time just seized on it.
Yeah.
You know, it made a great story, and it turned into this cultural thing that's been a stereotype ever since. really only in Western cultures, though.
Yeah.
But the evidence is still that the full-blown crisis only affects between about 8 and 20% of people in midlife, in their 40s, early 50s, which is actually less than what you see reported for younger age groups like yours. It's around 25 to 30% of people in your age group experiencing mental health crisis. So it's not really a thing for midlife. I think it is natural to take stock around midlife. But basically, the midlife crisis has just become the butt of jokes, which I think makes it really difficult for people, especially men, to talk about how they're feeling and how they're coping with everything they might have going on in their lives at the time.
100%, yeah.
It's the point at which more people are dependent on you than at any other time. So you maybe have a partner, young children, aging parents, work colleagues who report to you, a boss who depends on you. It's a really intense period of life.
Yeah.
There definitely is a lot of stuff going on.
100%. I can see why people get so freaked out, because the thought of that for me, obviously it's years away, but I'm like, oh no, thank you. That's too much pressure. The pressure would be kind of like suffocating, I imagine. But
it can be, yeah. And we'll talk about that. But how about we start heading into this thing called the quarterlife crisis? But what's your take on this? Because I think it's a relatively new phenomenon. I don't remember it ever being mentioned when I was in my 20s.
I can't remember when I became familiar with the term, but I imagine it will have definitely been online or on social media. Maybe even me like experiencing some symptoms of it in recent years and like desperately Googling like, what's wrong with me? Like, what's going on? I've actually noticed that being kind of a big trend online with my generation particularly, where we're constantly trying to like pathologize our moods and behaviors as if we can make things seem or feel more manageable. Like if you have a name for them. And in a way that definitely helps, because you have the language to look for people experiencing the same as you, and it's easier to find out how to cope. But on the other hand, I think we get wrapped up in putting a label on it and trying to make sense of it and forget it's maybe just a natural part of life that you need to just ride out. Because, it is kind of similar to the midlife crisis, I would say, in terms of you are having a bit of an identity crisis.
Your generation are maybe more open to thinking about their well-being and their mental health and maybe go kind of looking for solutions or information, if they're not feeling well. Whereas it's not something we typically did when I was your age. And
it helps having all the resources we've got now as well. Like the fact that you can just Google, I'm feeling like dread about my future. What's going on with me? I'm this age. I do this, blah, blah, blah. And there'll be like a Reddit post from someone who's going through the same thing, or you'll get an AI generated answer.
Absolutely. Yeah. You've got all that information at your fingertips. Yeah. Which we didn't.
Which is good. But I think you can also get so wrapped up in it and trying to be like, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? Instead of just going, okay, well, it seems like a lot of people are feeling this way. Maybe I should just accept the fact that we're all kind of victims of our circumstances, victims of being 20-somethings in the 21st century.
Yeah, and when it's normalised, that's a healthy thing. You don't think I'm having to go through this alone. Yeah. When I looked at this, I saw two different takes on the quarter-life crisis. So one is that in your early 20s, you have a crisis about being locked out of the normal expected adult world. So get a good job, be in a relationship, start to get your housing sorted out. And people who aren't achieving those milestones feel isolated from this. But then in your later 20s, kind of into your early 30s, the crisis is all about being locked in. So feeling stuck or trapped in a career that you're not enjoying, or in a relationship or a lifestyle that doesn't suit you, and you want to break out of this, but you feel stuck, which is really a lot like the typical midlife crisis.
Yeah.
Is that idea of being locked out and then locked in something you're hearing?
I think so. And I think it maybe like both even apply to kind of both ends of the spectrum with age, because I think people maybe either feel like they've missed the boat to do something with their lives, or they've got on the wrong boat and there's no way off. I think for my generation, a lot of that comes from the fact that we pick our subjects at school and our uni degrees, or a life path or college course, the job we're going into. You do usually pick quite a lot of that at a young age before you have any real idea of who we are. And I think that's why we've seen such a rise in popularity of like gap years and people wanting to go and travel and stuff, because like we say, like the fact that my generation's speaking about these feelings a bit more, people are maybe a bit more hesitant to like jump into something straight away, which is definitely a good thing.
when you consider that your generation are probably going to live to 100, most of you,
Yeah.
it is crazy to think that at 16, 18, you're being asked to make decisions about what will affect a large portion of your working life. You know, you've got like 80 years ahead of you. You won't be working for all of that, but people are asking you to make those decisions and set yourself up. How can you possibly know what you're good at and what you want to do at that point?
And even if you do go and travel and do all the, like, you might change your mind. You might come home and be like, oh, I'd sign myself up for uni, but now I want to start a business and stuff. So I think a lot of that comes from kind of boxing ourselves into these unrealistic ideals of what we're supposed to be doing, or maybe what our parents have told us we should be doing. Because the other idea that I've heard about the quarter life crisis is that people fall into two categories. So there's the meaning types and like the stability types as well. So meaning types, all about being independent, finding your thing, expressing yourselves, maybe kind of considered the outliers of society, maybe like artists, writers, activists, dropouts, even maybe more creative types. Whereas the stability types are more kind of conformist and want to build a stable life for themselves. They want the career, they want the relationship, the nice house, all that kind of thing. They're the lawyers or the finance bros, the ones that are like seeking marriages, this kind of thing. So the crisis, I think, occurs for a lot of people, like when the meaning types start feeling the need to seek stability, like, I'm gonna sort my life out. I need to, like, I need to get the house, I need to get the relationship I've spent all this time dilly-dallying about, and now I need to really lock in. And then, vice versa for the stability types who are all of a sudden like, oh, I should have took up painting when I was younger. I wish I had like done more for this cause that I care about. So grass is always greener, in summary. And for me and my friends' experiences, I would say this is like definitely a thing, because we probably all box ourselves into an idea of how we're going to live and what we're going to be, even in the few years from like school into uni, or your first few years working. You kind of imagine this path for yourself, and I think we all forget that you actually have no idea where you're going to be even in a couple of years. Like, a lot of my friends, actually most of my friends, dropped out of uni or changed course or went on to go and do something completely different. If I could go back in time and ask all my friends in school, like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And then fast forward to now, everyone would be like, no way, and probably have a big giggle at themselves. Some people probably have a meltdown. But yeah, for me, even like when I decided to study pharmacology, I think I was definitely seeking that stability, because I was like, okay, it's a STEM subject, I'm a woman in STEM, I'm going to have a stable career, be a strong career woman. But then halfway through realized like it wasn't a good fit for me. And I actually remember writing my personal statement for English and social policy. I remember saying it like, I feel creatively stifled and all this stuff. So
It worked, obviously.
yeah, I know, but I was surprised. Whoever was on admissions probably thought I was like a massive whip and like, oh my goodness, like this girl like doesn't have a clue. So I'm kind of surprised they let me in. But that is how I felt. I was like, oh, I've chosen this stable box for myself, and now I want to like express myself and all this. But I was having a bit of a mini crisis over it.
Would you say you're still a stability type or more leaning towards more meaning?
See, that's a tricky one. I think now though, actually probably more meaning. Like, I've been really motivated recently to like travel, but I think at some point in the next few years I want to kind of save up some money and do some traveling and try a bunch of stuff instead of tying myself down to like one specific career path. It's all up in the air. I think just now I'm feeling very like young, wild, and free. I'm seeking meaning, blah, blah, blah.
And you
By the time I
should.
graduate, it might be different. I don't know.
I mean, the jobs that you will all be doing 5 or 10 years from now, probably a good portion of them don't exist today.
Yeah, exactly.
So how can you plan for, well, this is what I want to be doing? It's more just kind of find your way, figure it out as you go along. You don't need to set yourself on a path and think, oh, this is it.
And I think when we spoke about this previously, your advice for me was kind of like your 20s are really your year for just trying absolutely everything, like every opportunity that comes your way. If it challenges you or if it's something you're into, whatever, just say yes to it as much as you can and go and see the world and try new things, and don't be bothered about what your peers are doing. But I think that's really sound advice. And you do often hear that advice from careers advisors and stuff, which I think is good now. I think there's a lot more of an understanding that not, the typical like prescribed path isn't going to work for everyone.
Yeah. If you and your friends have a concern that if you do that, you'll fall behind everyone else who will be making it, I would try and discard that as much as you can, because you've got so much time ahead of you in terms of like careers and life. This is the time where you probably have the fewest responsibilities. So live, travel, try some different things, figure it out, because you are more likely to find something that really engages you, that motivates you to get through the next 30, 40 years of a working life. Whereas someone who makes a decision now and is set on that path might find they're in a bit of a rut, and it's harder to change later on when you've got a family, maybe got a mortgage, all of those things.
So maybe put yourself in slightly more uncomfortable, like different positions now, and save yourself a lot of stress later on, possibly. So speaking about it later on, what can we say about the midlifers, Dad? Where does the midlife crisis stem from?
Well, I think it is a cultural phenomenon rather than a clinical one, but there is definitely something around you questioning your life in your 40s and 50s. And what I've found really interesting in respect of that is all the research on something called the happiness curve. Have you heard of that?
I think we've spoken about it before briefly, but remind me.
Yeah, so a ton of studies from the early 2000s, and now there's something like 600 studies from 150 odd countries that have all shown that people's happiness, their satisfaction with life, follows a U-shaped curve, and it hits its lowest point at around 47 to 48 years old in Western cultures. So even when you control for every other variable, so gender, education, socioeconomic class, health, they all bottom out at about the same point.
Wow.
Happiness seems to be a function of age. And I was a textbook case, rock bottom at 48. Now, if you'd asked me when I was in my 20s what I thought the life happiness curve looked like, I would have said it's hump-shaped. And I would have thought between your 20s and 40s, you're building, you're progressing your career, making more and more money, you establish yourself, you're living a really nice life in your 40s. And then when your health and fitness start to decline and you look ahead into your 50s, you just think it's all downhill from here. It's
all doom and gloom.
It's going to be disease, decay, death. But
cheery.
Well, that's what you would think. But that's not the case. What the science shows is it's the other way around. You get happier and happier from your 50s into your 80s. Despite the health problems you are bound to have as you get older, in most cases, in your 70s, you end up being even happier with your life than you were in your 20s.
That is kind of bonkers. I think actually as well, that's quite reassuring, because I've been lucky enough to have like a really enjoyable life so far. And then if it's going to get better than it has been before I kick the bucket, then that's great news. That sounds good to me. And they do usually say it gets worse before it gets better. So I guess it's kind of, you can see that as well in our life path. You have this kind of dip, but then things start moving back up. So that is reassuring.
So it's not guaranteed. It is a tendency, but most people follow that pattern. So your 20s, you're likely to be pretty happy. 30s, things get a bit tougher, but you've got the energy and the perseverance to kind of push through and achieve some of those big milestones. But 40s, can be a bit of a rough ride. Some people sail through it, but, the tendency is that's when you're going to find things are tough. And another thing I found really interesting about the research is there's something that happens biologically for evolutionary reasons that causes this. And the reason they know this, strangely enough, is that they've observed the same thing in chimps and orangutans. So they have what could loosely be called a midlife crisis. And
that makes me so sad for all the orangutans I saw at Barcelona Zoo. And I'm like, no, guys, don't be sad.
And it's definitely not because they've got a big mortgage and they're getting stressed by the challenging KPIs their bosses set them.
Well, I hope not anyways. Yeah, that would be pretty tragic.
Because they're, sitting out in their enclosure, eating their melon or whatever orangutans and chimps eat. But the researchers asked zookeepers to observe over 500 chimps and orangutans and track their behavior. And obviously zookeepers know their animals and their behavior really well. And they saw the same pattern. They go through a slump in their middle years, what would be the equivalent in their lifespan of a human at about 45 to 50.
That's so cool.
I'll put a link to an article about it in the show notes because it is really fascinating. And the reason they think this happens in primates and humans is because our brains are rewiring, much like they do in adolescence, which is preparing you for the next stage in life. Because humans and primates are some of the few species where the females outlive their reproductive years. What's called the grandmother effect.
Yeah, I've heard of that actually. That's cool.
So nature is keeping us around for a reason. And the reason is that the job of the tribal elders is to now pass on knowledge to the younger members of the tribe who are now in their prime and are most able to help the pack thrive. So for the midlifers, we don't need to have the drive to compete and achieve anymore because that job is done. So at this stage, our primitive middle-aged selves didn't need to compete for a mate or compete for the best shelter and food sources because we'd established ourselves. Our job was to help the next generation defend what we'd set up and pass all our wisdom on to enable them to make the tribe even fitter and stronger. But the problem is we now have a modern society that still revolves around constant achievement and meeting goals and get on to the next thing and show how successful you are. And that's probably why in midlife you start to feel so empty and hollow because your newly rewired brain is saying, nah, I'm not into this anymore. I want to do something different.
Yeah.
But society is saying, achieve, get more, do more.
Yeah.
And that's why so many midlifers feel confused, I think.
Yeah.
Their brains want to transform to this more mentoring, nurturing role for the tribe. They want more family time and less of the daily grind. And society doesn't let them. You know, we've been conditioned to think it's all about achievement and accumulating more things all the way to retirement. But that's not what we should be doing in evolutionary terms at this point. I think that's why midlifers talk a lot about wanting to give back and find more meaning. It's what we're being wired to do at this point in our lives.
Yeah.
Makes sense, right?
It makes a lot of sense. And so would you say that's what's going on for you? Like, are you feeling like you kind of want to like pump the brakes a bit and try it a wee bit and give back?
I do now.
Yeah.
So my late 40s, like 47 to 48, you know, at the end of that period when I was doing that long commute, that was really rough, kind of right before lockdown. And then obviously all had to get through lockdown. That changed things. But I would not have expected to be as happy and satisfied with my life now at 55 as I am. If you'd asked me that 10 years ago, I couldn't see things kind of getting better.
Oh, that's a shame.
And some of that is down to circumstance and what you do. But actually, I think I've probably gone through that period. But I'm not aware that there's that kind of biological stuff going on in your 20s when you're at your prime. So it doesn't explain the quarterlife crisis. And I don't know if you've got any thoughts on what causes that.
I think just kind of like what I mentioned earlier on with the way the political and economic challenges that everyone's facing, but I think my generation is maybe feeling a little bit more. Other generations grew up with all kinds of political and economic crises, but I think coupled with the effects of social media, where you basically just have this highlight reel of everyone else's lives and what everyone else is doing. And it doesn't matter if it's like some influencer that you follow who's got more money, who makes more money off an Instagram post than you will ever make in like a regular salary job, or if it's like your friend who's like doing better with their job. Like, you're just surrounded by all of this fuel to compare yourself to. And I think that combined with the political and economic situation, it's a pretty nasty combination, I think.
Yeah, and there is a development in all of this research around the happiness curve that relates to that, which is quite concerning, I think. The same researchers who discovered it have noticed that recently the whole of the left-hand side of that curve, like when you're in your 20s and 30s, when it was quite high in life satisfaction, has totally collapsed since about 2015. So what used to be high levels of satisfaction in your 20s before the dip is totally flatlining. So Gen
Mhm.
Z are basically really sad all the time, and it probably won't pick up until that brain rewiring happens in the 40s, which is really quite
That is really
desperate.
sad. Yeah.
And they looked around at, well, what could be causing this? What does it correlate to?
Mm,
And there's something that happened all over the developed world at the same time around 2014, 2015, and that was the rise of social media.
yeah. Which
So the
makes
only
so much
thing
sense.
they can see that could potentially explain why there's been this big shift in people's life satisfaction,
Yeah,
mental health.
100%. That is pretty depressing. So to try and bring the vibe up a little bit, shall we maybe talk about some things that we can do to combat that?
Yes.
It makes a lot of sense though, because social media is depressing and it is just this big comparison melting pot. But that's why I would say probably prioritizing your mental health and unplugging from social media every once in a while is no bad thing at all
Hmm.
and should actually be encouraged. I wish we had more kind of education in schools as well, because obviously these younger generations are growing up with more and more exposure to social media. So I think it's really important that young kids are being taught, but especially my generation who have grown up with it and are already feeling the effects into their adult life, probably just being able to unplug and remind yourself of what realistic expectations look like. That would be a pretty big thing.
Yeah. And I would just say at this point, because you have got through it, social media
Yeah.
sort of came in when you were already in your teenage years, but now it's pervasive. And so parents of younger children are grappling with, when do they get a smartphone and when have they got access to, social media sites. And for any parents of younger children grappling with those decisions, I just want to put a plug in for a book called The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. It is a remarkable read for all the research on this, and would highly recommend you have a look if you want to think about, is this damaging or dangerous for my kids?
Yeah.
And basically his conclusion is teenagers shouldn't have access to social media until they're 16. The
Yeah.
harm it does when their brain is at a really critical point is so clear to see the way he maps it out.
And as someone who was on social media a good bit before I was 16, I would really agree. I think it's tricky because everyone is on it and you have to combat the peer pressure and kids feeling left out and stuff. But that's why I think more and more people, more parents particularly, should be getting educated on the harms so that hopefully we have a bit of a domino effect. And then even if you are on social media, like we say, unplugging and touch some grass, like ground yourself. Remember the whole entire, it's crazy. Like we have all the information about the world, on the world, everything just in this little smartphone. Like it's not good for our brains. Touch some grass. Try and cultivate some realistic expectations of your life and what your life looks like.
Or an alternative to that, which I've tried to stick to over the last few months from when I first heard about it, was I read something where someone said, when you wake up in the morning, look at the sky before you look at a screen.
Yeah.
And rather than just like waking up, reaching for your phone, I have tried to kind of get up, get ready for the day, see the sky before, draw the curtains back,
Yep.
see the sky before I look at a screen. And I've actually found that is a better start to the day for me.
Yeah, and it's so simple as well.
Mm.
It's just a nice reminder that we actually don't need to live in a virtual world if we don't.
Yeah.
We can remove ourselves. Another thing I think is really helpful for having a crisis at any age, because the biggest predictor of future life satisfaction and longevity is good relationships, is investing in those relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've been really lucky to have a really strong friendship group since school, and being able to communicate with them and have some empathy for each other and relate to each other, it just helps out a lot. And also family. I've been very lucky to have you and Mum and Charlie.
But also we recognise you do have great friends round about you.
I'm so lucky.
You all look after each other, which is really reassuring for us. Now that you've left home, we know you've got that kind of support around you.
I think whether it's a friend group or if you are going out to find a sense of meaning and purpose through exploring like hobbies and interests, just finding people with the same interests as you and like kind of creating a sense of community for yourself. I think just community in any shape or form is really, really good for combating the symptoms of any kind of like meltdown identity crisis. So I would say that's a pretty big thing, having new experiences and getting involved with stuff.
I think we need to ditch this notion that our life is going to be a, gently upward sloping line to success at some point in the future. I think we know careers are squiggly lines all over the place. We take some wrong turns. We try and get back on track. We try something different. So you don't have to have it all figured out in your 20s or even in your 40s. There are more startup founders who are 50 plus than those in their 20s and 30s. Older people are more likely to be running successful businesses. So it's never too late to make a change.
Because you're as wise, man.
Well, maybe that's it. We've learned a lot along the way.
Yeah, you've got the grandmother theory thing?
The grandmother theory. We've outlived our reproductive years and we pass that wisdom on to the younger generation, which is exactly what we're doing here.
Yeah.
So for Gen X especially, I would say that there can be a sense of being locked into a life you don't feel you can break out of, but you don't have to break out of it in one big move. So try lots of things, prototype the new life that you want, try tiny experiments and see what works. Just variety is the spice of life. Try some different things to kind of break the mold in little bits. Connecting with younger generations is also good, right? What we're doing here. Exercising those mentoring and nurturing pathways to build your middle-aged brain. And don't get hung up on crises. It's extremely unlikely you are having a big dramatic event as in a mental health crisis. These are just the challenges of modern life. Everyone's experiencing it to some extent. Obviously, if you feel your mental health is suffering, seek help. But it is unlikely you're having a crisis in the clinical sense. There is more stress and uncertainty caused by kind of not knowing how to move forward than just deciding to do something. So just take it one step at a time.
Yeah, very sound advice.
So we hope you found that useful and enjoyed listening. We've certainly enjoyed discussing the similarities and the differences between the midlife and the quarter-life crisis. And I think, Lily, we could say we probably have more in common than we thought were different about those two phenomena.
Definitely. And it was nice to actually get to debrief a bit on, I think, some of the things that you were worried about when you were in your little slump. And then I'm sure when I get into the depths of my quarter-life crisis slump, I can get your mum on the phone and I think you guys will understand a bit more about what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Woo!
Well, that's our first episode on tape.
Or on a microchip or the cloud or something somewhere. And we don't use tape anymore. Sorry.
Yeah, that's more likely, isn't it? Well, we hope you've enjoyed it. Did you enjoy it, Lily?
I did. It was really fun.
Yeah. Well, should we do that bit again?
We're so at our endings. Yeah, it was so good. I thought it was great. But we're definitely new at this, so still trying to figure it out. So yeah, if you liked this episode, it would really help us to get things off to a good start if you could give us a little follow and a cheeky 5-star rating on your podcast app. This is really important to us in the first few weeks of a new podcast to help it find its audience.
And if you want to be really kind, please leave us a review. That'll help new people that find us see some feedback on the show. And obviously, we'd really welcome your feedback in these early days so we can learn from it. If you'd like to connect with us, you can follow us both on LinkedIn. The links will be in the show notes. And in the next episode, we're going to be talking about something else that affects both generations equally, and that is imposter syndrome. So if you've ever felt like you're going to be found out or you can't get over feeling a bit of a fraud for something you know you're actually pretty good at, listen out for that one with some tips on how to overcome it. But for now, thanks for listening to this episode of the Gen XZ Exchange.